Before you even think she's ignoring you, losing interest, or forgetting your existence, you need to hear this, because the truth is far more uncomfortable and far more powerful than anything you've ever been told. Younger women don't become obsessed with men the way most guys think. It's not your looks. It's not your money. It's not your status. Obsession doesn't come from what you show her. It comes from what she feels when she's around you. And most men have no idea how powerful that is. You've been taught to impress her. You've been taught to chase her. You've been taught to win her attention by being louder, funnier, more available. But the men she thinks about non-stop, they're the complete opposite. They're not trying to be chosen. They're not constantly showing up. They're not waiting for her replies or rearranging their lives to stay on her mind. They do something far more rare, far more unsettling, and far more unforgettable. And if you don't understand this, you will spend your life trying to force connection instead of naturally attracting it. This is not about playing games. This is about understanding psychology, energy, and identity at a level most men never reach. Because once you understand what truly makes a younger woman think about you on repeat, what makes her compare you to every man she meets, what makes her mind drift back to you even when she tries to move on, you stop chasing validation and start living in a way that commands it. You're about to hear the truth no one tells men, the truth that changes everything. So sit with this, listen closely, and don't move, because what I'm about to reveal will shift the way you show up as a man forever. If there is one truth men need to understand about attraction, especially when it comes to younger women, it's this: obsession does not come from being constantly available, predictable, or endlessly giving. Those things might make you likable, but they will never make you unforgettable. What makes a younger woman think about you non-stop is the subtle tension created when she realizes she cannot fully read you. You are not reactive. You are not desperate. You are not emotionally noisy. And this alone sets you apart from almost every man she encounters. People don't become addicted to comfort. They become addicted to curiosity. They replay the actions and energy of the person who leaves questions, not answers. And yet most men sabotage this dynamic because they are terrified of being misunderstood. They rush to explain themselves. They over-communicate. They fill every silence. They try to prove their value through words instead of presence. In doing so, they kill the very thing that creates psychological attachment, unpredictability grounded in self-control. Unpredictability does not mean being inconsistent, disrespectful, or manipulative. It means you refuse to operate on emotional autopilot. When a younger woman cannot predict your emotional reactions, not because you're unstable, but because you're centered, she becomes curious. Curiosity becomes fascination. Fascination becomes obsession. The mystery is not created through games, it is created through depth, your depth. The depth of a man who is not emotionally hungry, not searching for a savior, not trying to cover his emptiness with attention from a woman. When you are emotionally grounded and spiritually aligned, your actions naturally form a pattern she cannot interpret fully. One moment you are warm and fully present, and the next moment you are focused back on your life, your work, your purpose. Not because you are acting busy, but because you genuinely are. Younger women can sense when a man's attention comes from intention or insecurity. And the man who is intentional, the man who is selective, the man who is not available to everyone, he becomes the one she remembers. Predictability kills attraction because it removes the sense of challenge. Not a toxic challenge, but a psychological one. When everything is known, the imagination dies. But when something about you remains slightly beyond her understanding, your emotional discipline, your calmness, your silence, her mind continues trying to map you out long after you've left the room. And this is where most men fail. They think younger women want constant engagement, endless validation, or loud displays of masculinity. What actually gets into her mind is the man who speaks only when he has something meaningful to say, the man whose words don't spill out to fill silence but emerge with purpose, the man who responds, not reacts. This creates an emotional signature she is not used to. She starts to notice the way you look at her, the way you pause before speaking, the way you listen with presence instead of ego, and suddenly she begins to anticipate you. She starts wondering about your life, your intentions, your thoughts. Not because you're distant, but because you're defined. The men who are most obsessed over are the ones who do not demand attention. They command it simply by being aligned with themselves. When your emotional world isn't chaotic, your energy feels unfamiliar in the best possible way. Younger women live in a world where men either over-explain or over-impress. So when you show up balanced, thoughtful, stable, and slightly unpredictable, not because of games, but because you're navigating life with purpose, you break her emotional pattern, and anything that breaks a pattern becomes unforgettable. She cannot place you in a category. She cannot compare you. You are not giving her the usual emotional script. And it is this disruption that makes her think about you long after the conversation ends. Because you didn't try to impress her. You didn't try to chase her. You didn't try to prove anything. You simply showed up as yourself, a self she cannot fully decode. The hardest lesson for men is understanding that obsession is not created through effort. It is created through alignment. The more you chase certainty, the less she feels anything. The more you try to win her, the faster she loses interest. But the moment you stop working to be understood and start working to understand yourself, everything shifts. You become unpredictable in the most powerful way, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you are hard to replace. Remember this. When a man becomes emotionally predictable, he becomes forgettable. But when he becomes emotionally grounded, he becomes unforgettable. If you truly want to understand what keeps a younger woman thinking about you long after the moment has passed, you must understand the power of emotional control, not the superficial version of control that comes from suppressing your feelings or pretending to be cold. I'm talking about the deeper mastery. The kind that radiates through your presence, through the way you speak, the way you move, the way you respond to life itself. Younger women are not drawn to emotional chaos, even if they sometimes mistake it for passion. What leaves a permanent imprint on their minds is a man who has authority over his internal world. A man who shows emotion without being consumed by it. A man who listens without instantly reacting. A man who feels deeply but remains grounded. Most men today operate on emotional autopilot. Their reactions are instant, loud, and unfiltered. They get triggered easily, they get jealous quickly, and they reveal their insecurity long before they reveal their character. This kind of emotional volatility doesn't make a woman think about you. It makes her move away from you. Emotional control is attractive because it signals maturity. It signals safety. It signals a man who is not drowning in his own inner storms. When a man can stand still while everything else feels chaotic, his presence becomes magnetic. Younger women, who often feel overwhelmed by their own emotions, become deeply drawn to the man who can hold himself together. Your calm becomes a refuge. Your stability becomes an anchor. And your silence becomes a message louder than any words you could say. Emotional control is not about being unbothered, it's about being intentional. You are not reacting from pain, fear, or ego, you are responding from clarity. And clarity is rare, painfully rare. That rarity is what makes a woman replay your presence in her mind. When you don't rush to defend yourself, when you don't mirror her emotional swings, when you don't get pulled into unnecessary arguments, she starts to see something in you she doesn't see in men her own age. She sees discipline, she sees restraint. She sees a man who is aware of his own power and doesn't waste it. That alone sets you apart. Think about it. Most men speak before thinking, react before reflecting, and commit before understanding. But the man who pauses, even for 1 second, creates a different energetic experience. Instead of creating tension, he creates curiosity. Instead of adding noise, he adds depth. Instead of making her doubt, he makes her feel safe enough to open up. Emotional control isn't just attractive, it's transformative. It elevates the entire interaction. It elevates her. Younger women are used to intensity disguised as masculinity, loud confidence, big gestures, oversharing, overcompensating. But when she meets a man who doesn't need to perform, a man who doesn't need validation, a man whose strength comes from inner alignment rather than external approval, she feels it instantly. Her nervous system responds. Her mind responds, and her heart responds. Your calmness gives her space to relax. Your emotional discipline gives her space to be vulnerable. Your stillness gives her space to think. And once a woman associates you with emotional safety, she never forgets you. Another reason emotional control is powerful is because it communicates that you have a life bigger than moments of emotional impulsivity. You're not trapped in your reactions. You're not controlled by temporary feelings. You're not living through your ego. You are living through purpose. And a purposeful man becomes unforgettable because he is not swinging between emotional highs and lows. He is anchored. She sees that in the way you handle rejection, the way you handle stress, the way you handle disagreements. Your ability to stay grounded shows her that you can handle life, not just romance. And that kind of man is rare. When you carry emotional control, your presence starts doing the talking for you. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to chase anything. You don't need to impress anyone. Your energy becomes your introduction. Your silence becomes your power. And your actions become your message, one she will think about long after she walks away. Remember this, a woman may be attracted to your looks, your confidence, or your charm, but she becomes obsessed with your emotional discipline. That is the mark of a man she can't forget. If there is one quality that silently separates men who are momentary from men who become unforgettable, it is purpose. Not ambition alone, not hustle culture, not the superficial image of being busy. I'm talking about a life that is anchored in meaning, direction, and self-respect. A younger woman does not obsess over a man who chases her. She obsesses over a man who is already chasing something bigger than both of them. Purpose is not just attractive, it is magnetic because it communicates identity. It tells her you have a world she can step into, not a void she needs to fill. It shows her you are not a man drifting through life, waiting for someone to come give you meaning. You have meaning. You have forward motion. You have a direction that existed before she walked into your life and will continue whether she stays or not. Most men misunderstand this. They think women want attention, affection, and constant presence. But the truth is, a woman is drawn to a man whose life does not revolve around her. She wants to feel valued, yes, but she does not want to carry the weight of being your entire world. When a man makes a woman his purpose, he stops being interesting. He becomes predictable, emotionally needy, and energetically drained. But when a man has a purpose that commands his focus, his energy becomes self-generating. He has discipline, he has structure, and he has clarity. And these qualities change the way he moves through every interaction. A purposeful man speaks differently. He doesn't rush his words because he respects his time and energy. He listens differently. He doesn't absorb chaos, he filters it. He walks differently. There is weight in each step because he knows where he's going. Everything about him reflects a deeper internal order, and that order is what captivates a younger woman's mind. She feels the direction in you even before you talk about it. Purpose is an energy, not just an idea. A man with purpose becomes attractive without trying because his life naturally creates boundaries. He doesn't have time to entertain drama. He doesn't have space for emotional games. He doesn't chase temporary pleasure because it distracts him from long-term fulfillment. This quiet discipline is what sets him apart, and the younger woman feels it in the most subtle ways: the way he structures his morning, the way he prioritizes his commitments, the way he handles setbacks, the way he responds instead of reacting. His consistency becomes a form of authority. His direction becomes a source of stability. She is not drawn to him because he needs her. She is drawn to him because he doesn't. Purpose also creates emotional distance in the healthiest way, not the distance of avoidance, but the distance of focus. You are present with her when you choose to be, but your life does not pause when she leaves. This contrast is powerful. It tells her you value connection, but you do not depend on it for identity. And that balance makes her think about you more, not less. She begins to admire the way you operate. She respects your structure. She becomes curious about your goals. And slowly, without dramatic effort, your purpose becomes part of the reason she thinks about you. It creates a gravitational field around you that she feels every time she interacts with you. Younger women often look for stability, not in money alone, but in mindset. They look for direction, not in external power, but in inner clarity. When they meet a man whose purpose is alive, they feel a sense of emotional safety and psychological stimulation. They admire the discipline behind your actions. They feel secure in the way you carry yourself. And they begin to imagine themselves aligned with that energy, not because you asked them to, but because your purpose naturally invites them in. The most powerful part of purpose is that it eliminates the need for performance. You don't need to act strong because your life already proves your strength. You don't need to talk about your worth because your direction already reflects it. You don't need to argue your value because your consistency makes it obvious. And when a woman sees a man living in alignment with his purpose, she doesn't need explanations. She feels the truth of who he is. Remember this. A man who knows where he is going becomes irresistible to a woman who is still discovering who she wants to be. Purpose is not just attractive, it is unforgettable. What truly separates a man who passes through a woman's life from a man who stays imprinted in her mind is not charm, not money, and not good looks. It's the rare quality of identity, an inner solidity that makes you stand out in a world where most people are shaped by external noise. When you carry a sense of self that is unshakable, grounded, and not influenced by trends, opinions, or emotional volatility, you become rare, and it is rarity that creates psychological imprint. A younger woman thinks about the man who stands out from the crowd, not because he is loud, but because he is unmistakably himself. We live in a generation where everyone is performing. People mimic each other's behavior, words, energy, and mindset. Men chase whatever they think will get attention, blending into the same patterns until nothing about them is unique. But the man who becomes unforgettable is the one who refuses to dilute himself. He doesn't chase approval. He doesn't adjust his values to fit in. He doesn't pretend to be someone else to impress her. His authenticity is not accident. It is discipline. And this discipline is exactly what makes a woman notice him long after he leaves. Younger women are perceptive in ways men underestimate. They can sense when a man carries depth versus when he carries an ego. They can feel when he is living from a place of truth versus when he is performing for validation. And because younger women encounter so much superficial behavior online and in real life, the moment they meet a man with real depth, it hits different. He becomes the exception, not the rule. Depth is not about being serious or complicated. It's about knowing who you are, knowing your values, knowing your boundaries, knowing what kind of man you want to be. When a man has identity, he doesn't get lost in the energy of others. He influences the room instead of being influenced by it. This kind of man leaves a psychological imprint because people are drawn to what they cannot easily replicate. Anyone can imitate confidence, but not everyone can embody self-respect. Anyone can mimic attraction techniques, but not everyone can demonstrate emotional maturity. Anyone can talk loudly about their standards, but not everyone can stand by them. Your rarity is not defined by how impressive you are. It is defined by how consistent you are with who you claim to be. Younger women think about the man who is predictable not in behavior but in character. A man who is steady in his principles even when emotions run high. A man who does not shift his identity to get attention. A man whose silence speaks louder than another man's performance. Rarity also comes from restraint. In a world obsessed with oversharing, the man who keeps aspects of his life private becomes intriguing. In a world desperate for attention, the man who values solitude becomes magnetic. In a world where every man chases, the man who chooses carefully becomes unforgettable. You become the one she thinks about because you don't give her everything at once. Not as a tactic, but as a reflection of your nature. You don't rush intimacy. You don't reveal everything immediately. You don't collapse your world around her presence. This creates a healthy space where she can lean in, where her curiosity grows, where she begins to imagine what lies beneath your calm exterior. A psychological imprint is formed when a woman experiences something she cannot categorize, and this is exactly what happens when she meets a man with depth and identity. She struggles to define you because you do not fit the common patterns. You're not emotionally chaotic, but you're not emotionally numb. You're not distant, but you're not clingy. You're not overly available, but you're not playing games. You are balanced in a way that feels almost unfamiliar to her. That unfamiliarity triggers fascination, and fascination is the seed of obsession. This is why a woman can meet hundreds of men and forget most of them, but still find herself replaying the presence of one man who carried himself differently. One man whose energy was grounded, one man whose purpose was clear, one man whose emotional control was real. That man becomes the one she thinks about when she's alone, when she compares, when she reflects. Because deep down, she knows that kind of man is rare. Remember this. A man who knows who he is will always stand out in a world full of people pretending to be someone else. And it is the man who stands out that she cannot stop thinking about.